Hello everybody, this is Gregory with 5 Minute Catholic Apologetics and Living, where 5 minutes of your time may get you to the divine. Today I'm going to posit some possible pope names for our next pope. What are the pros and cons of certain names, and what is my bet if I had to put money on it. Now before we begin, let's start with the prayer. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sancti, Amen. Gloria Patri et Filii et Spiritui Sancto, sicut erat in principio et nunc et semper et saecula saeculorum. Amen. All right, so you could say, let me raise this mic higher. You could say that this kind of is a macabre topic, but look, we're all going to die. Pope Francis has been our pope for 11 years now, almost 12 years. He's going to die sooner than he is not going to die. So he'll die pretty soon. He's probably not going to do another 12 years. You never know, but he's probably going to die. So with the potential successors, for me, it's always more fun to want to know what the names are, because I think, in my lifetime, maybe if I'm lucky, we'll have maybe 10 popes in my lifetime. And so I find like what the person picks as their pope name, maybe, not always, will reveal something about their pontificate. Because if they pick a brand new name, it's more of a wild card, but if they're picking a name that we've had before, I think they're trying to telegraph to people the type of pope they're going to be. Now, I do believe that the Holy Spirit guides the conclave, despite what you might see in movies like Angels and Demons, or maybe the more recent movie Conclave. But I also realize, and I think people deep within Vatican would admit and acknowledge that there's politicking going on. So that being said, I'm not really going to spend time on the papabili, like who's the likely successor going to be. Let's just look at names. We're going to look at names and why or why not this name would be chosen, and what does it mean. Let's start with the obvious one, Francis II. Do I think the next pope would be Francis II? Absolutely not. If the successor to Francis is a liberal, which is a decent chance, he has stacked much of the College of Cardinals the last 12 years that he's been pope. Good chance there's going to be a St. Gallen mafia type of liberal modernist. Would they choose Francis II? No, because even they, or whoever this person would be, would know that Francis, and would be a British understatement, has had a controversial pontificate. And I think picking Francis II would be telegraphing too much, that you're going to be too much of a liberal. And even the liberals don't really like Francis that much to pick him as a name. And certainly a conservative would not pick Francis. So I think Francis II is completely off the table. I don't think, even if we get a liberal, they're touching that, because right now Francis is kryptonite. All right, let's look at another name, John the 24th. So I played this game with my friend Stephen, where we got to pick 3 names each. He went first. He picked a name, I picked a name, he picked a name, I picked a name, he picked a name, I picked a name. And we put $10 bet on who's going to be right, if either of us are right. So I picked John the 24th as my third choice. Now, why John the 24th? John the 23rd was our pope that ushered in Vatican II, 1958 to 1963. And he was known as a very kind of genteel farmer pope, just a nice, aw shucks Jimmy Carter kind of pope. We're not going to really get into some of the conspiracy theories about him and his connections to a very anti-Catholic group, and we're not going to go down that road. But I think there's a chance that we could have a John the 24th, because it's been 60 years since he was pope. He is a saint, and if somebody, and this of course would be a modernist, liberal, would pick John the 24th, I think they'd be telegraphing, I'm going to be like Francis, who tries to telegraph to everybody that he is of the people, but they're not going to touch Francis II. John the 23rd was one of these types, just close to the ground, very populist, very gentle, simple kind of guy. So it's like, I'm going to be simple, close to the people, and of course I'll be a liberal, because John the 23rd was a liberal. And by picking that name, you're essentially saying that we need to continue the reforms and the spirit of Vatican II. So I think there's a decent chance that name could be picked. Paul VII, no way. Paul VII would not be picked, even though even Paul VI, who was our pope from 1963 to 1978, is a saint too. It's like everybody's a saint. The only saint we don't have yet is John Paul I, and he's on the road, right, to being a saint too. I don't think liberals, a conservative would not pick Paul VII. The one good thing Paul did was Humanae Vitae, but he was a pretty bad pope. And depending on what argument you look at, some people will be like, well, he was duped. It was all the people underneath him, like Annabella Bonini and these guys, were orchestrating the spirit of Vatican II, and he just didn't know. And then others would say that he was definitely complicit. And near the end of his pontificate, the last 10 years, he didn't even write a encyclical. He was disillusioned and whatnot. And then, of course, he finally died. But no one's picking Paul VII because, again, Paul VII is like untouchable kryptonite because he was perceived to be a bad pope. So I don't see that. What's another one? Pius XIII. I do think Pius XIII. I think that was my first choice. No, it was my second choice. Was Pius XIII. I do think there's a chance we could get a Pius XIII. If somebody picks Pius XIII, what are they telegraphing? They are a traditionalist. And again, there's no such thing as liberal Catholics or conservative Catholics. You're either practicing or you're not. But for the sake of using the political terms, if somebody picks Pius XIII, they're telegraphing that they're going to go and be traditional. Because if you look at the last 7 Piuses, I mean, you go back to Pius V, Pius IV, Pius VI. These were 16th century ones. They reformed the Missal for Pius V. He was the Pope during the Battle of Lepanto. He reformed the Missal, the Catechism, all these great things, great saint. And then if you look more recent, Pius VII, imprisoned by Napoleon during the French Revolution. Pius VIII, good Pope. Pius IX was the Pope from the 1840s to the 1880s, ushered in Vatican Council I, papal infallibility. Then you look, Pius IX, good Pope. Pius X, great Pope, he's a saint. Pius XI, great Pope. Pius XII, the most recent Pius, was the Pope right before, he was the Pope during World War II, up until 1958, considered to be a very great statesman. So if somebody picks Pius XIII, they are they're essentially saying, yeah, Latin Mass, it's going to be all good again. And he is going to be telegraphing that we're going back to traditional stuff. What is another one that we could do? Could there be a Benedict? I don't think there's going to be a Benedict. Certainly the liberals wouldn't pick Benedict, and this would be Benedict XVII. But I don't think the conservatives. Ratzinger is considered one of the foremost theologians and thinkers of the 20th century. Brilliant man. I just don't see that name being picked. I think, here's my number one choice. And let's throw out, like, I would really love to see somebody pick an old name, like Innocent, Celestine, Damasus, Sylvester, Agapetus. Like, that'd be so cool to bring back. To me, an old name is anything that's probably, there are a lot of Clements in the 18th century, so anything like mid-1700s and previous. Let's get an Urban again, let's get a Boniface, but assuming we're not going to get like a Calixtus, assuming these other names, which I think I'd be pretty cool with. We just go like a crazy old name, like Agapetus, means love, right? But here's my number one choice of what I think the next person is going to be. John Paul III. Now, slam the brakes, because some people will be like, there's no way anyone would pick JP3. And he's a saint. It's only been 20 years since he was the Pope. No one's going to touch that. That's like, no way. That's like, you might as well be Peter II. I don't agree. I think that John Paul III would be a very kind of Otto von Bismarck, Ostpolitik, Realpolitik kind of choice. Because JP II represents different things to different people. He represents different things to different people. So to the kind of centrist to right centrist, JP2 is considered like a hardcore right winger. And if you look at the far right of traditional Catholicism, they consider JP2 kind of a middle, maybe even a modernist, because they look at the Assisi Conference and how he didn't do enough to stop the priest abuse crisis and some other things. But then you also see like there's a certain segment of the left, center to left, that actually respect JP2 because they somehow see him as being part of their group. So JP3 to me is somebody who's a centrist, because that is a centrist name. All the other names we picked, you're kind of gravitating. Now some would say, Gregory, you're completely wrong. it's not a centrist name. If you pick JP III, you're saying that you're a traditionalist. I don't think so. I think if you pick JP III, you're saying that the typical Catholic would maybe think you're a little right of center. But I think overall, it's a safe name because you're heralding back to a very famous name that was overall well loved around the world. We're not talking about the pockets of extremism on either side, but generally was well loved. He would kiss the ground when he arrived. He was great with the people, just so charismatic and just a great thinker and all these things. And so I think that a centrist would pick him because overall he was perceived to be a little right of center by most Catholics, a little right of center. So by picking his name, you are essentially what a lot of Trump acolytes are doing now that are in the Congress or in state legislature. They're kind of hitching their saddles to Trump because they see that they're reading the tea leaves that Trump is really preponderant right now, and they want to kind of be brought in with the Trump revolution again. And I think with JP, it's like people just it's like watching Christmas movies or going back to your house. There's just a lot of nostalgia when you look at old photos and whatnot. And I think if somebody picked JP III, they're going to have a lot of nostalgia kick that's going to be given to them, a lot of grace period, like a honeymoon period. And I think it's a name that it's been 20 years, but it's recent, but it's really not that recent. And I just think it's a name that, to me, is the number one choice, JP III. And if it's not JP III, I do think probably my number two choice. I don't think we're going to get a Pius XIII. We're certainly not going to get a Francis. I would say my second choice, I could see a John the 24th. So I'm going JP III, John the 24th. Those are my top two. Post in the comments, what are your top two guesses? Not the person who's going to be chosen. I just want the name that you think will be picked. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.